And as Andy mentioned, Hurricane Harvey is intensifying in the Gulf, heading straight to the Corpus Christi area.
It is expected to make landfall in the early morning hours Saturday. Our own Kurtis Quillin is on North Padre Island and joins us with more on the evacuation. Kurtis.
Well, guys, as you can see behind me, these waves are coming in incredibly high on North Padre Island, reaching in some points all the way up to the dunes. And people who lived in the Corpus Christi area nearly 50 years ago say they're having nightmares.
This is almost a reincarnation of Celia. I was 10 years old when Celia hit, and it started out as just a little depression, and then all of a sudden when it hit, it was a full-blown hurricane.
People who live on the Texas coast are on high alert Thursday, faced with what could be the state's first major hurricane since the turn of the century. For Corpus Christi, it would be the first since Hurricane Celia in 1970.
We haven't had a major storm in a long. Last one I can think of was Allen, and it didn't even hit us.
Harvey has left parts of South Texas a ghost town, mandatory evacuations ordered in areas, and voluntary evacuation notices in others. The upgrade in Harvey's strength Thursday morning was enough to convince Denise Keller it was time to hit the road for higher ground.
We packed up what we could, battened down everything underneath our stilted home, and we just pray to God that when we get back, we have a home to go to.
It's a prayer being said and a nervousness shared by thousands of Texans along the Gulf Coast, who hope when the storm clears and Harvey has left, they aren't left picking up pieces of their life.
It's very nerve-wracking. My husband and I was just talking like that when we came into this. I'm like, oh my God, just give us a house when we get home.
And as we mentioned earlier, much of the area under a mandatory evacuation order, but for those who simply cannot make it out, a shelter has been set up. If these waters are any indication, it's going to be a wild weekend on the Texas Gulf Coast. On North Padre Island, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News. Doug, Leslie.
In the meantime, let's head back down to learn more about Hurricane Harvey and what it's expected to do. Live from Corpus Christi reporting for us this morning and on scene is reporter Kurtis Quillin. He has the latest and an update for us this morning. Kurtis, what can you tell us?
Good morning, Central Texas. I'm standing in the Bob Hall Pier here on North Padre Island in Corpus Christi, where the surge has picked up dramatically since last night. We were out here helping our sister station here in Corpus Christi last night. You should be able to see the surge continuing to come in. It'll look like white lines racing toward us across your television screen. Those are the tops of the waves right now as they continue to move toward us as Hurricane Harvey is barreling toward the South Texas Gulf Coast. These waves were dramatically less energetic last night when we left the beach here. They have crept their way further and further away from the beach. The area here where we're standing is lined with dunes as you go across the beach. Last night, the water had just reached the dunes, and this morning, it's a good quarter mile to a half mile further inland. That's after this storm was upgraded to a Category 2 around 1 o'clock this morning. It's not far from being a Category 3. When we got the latest update about 4 o'clock this morning, we were only about 5 miles an hour or so from being a Category 3 where it's expected to be when it makes landfall somewhere in the Corpus Christi area. What we're hearing down here is it's likely to make landfall much further north than where we're at on North Padre. But where we're standing on the island, there is a voluntary evacuation notice. Much of this area is under a mandatory evacuation, and people have been making their way further north towards San Antonio and Austin to try and get away from this storm. Again, this is just a sign of the wild weekend that is to come. You can see behind me just some of the water that is continuing to creep its way further inland in front of Hurricane Harvey. Again, just another sign of the wild weekend we're in for here in Corpus Christi. Guys, we're live on North Padre Island, Channel 6 News. I'm Kurtis Quillin.
As part of our team coverage now, for the second member of our team on site, our very own Kurtis Quillin is live this morning for us. Kurtis, you're out there right now while the rains are coming in. What can you tell us?
Guys, the rains you mentioned are hitting me, smacking me right in the face. The waves, we're standing on the Bob Hall Pier on North Padre Island. The waves are picking up in intensity and frequency as Hurricane Harvey continues to barrel toward the South Texas coast. But the outer bands of it are already here, an unwelcome guest to thousands of Texans who live near the coast. I'll step out of the shot and you can see just how much stronger these waves have gotten since we last showed you roughly an hour ago. Those whitish, bluish lines racing towards you on your TV screen, those are the tops of the wave. That's the foam from the Gulf of Mexico coming toward the coast. Not far from where we're standing right now, there is a 6-foot tall sand wall, and the waves are starting to reach that sand wall. It's guarding a parking lot. They're talking surges here could vary between 5 and 12 feet in the Corpus Christi area. So as Harvey continues to barrel toward the coast, evacuations are continuing to be stressed here on North Padre Island. A lot of the island was able to get out last night. There are a few people still here. Houses continue to be boarded up. They're talking we could start seeing tropical storm strength winds where we're at right here around noon today. We're roughly 24 hours, a little less from actual landfall where the eye will come in of Hurricane Harvey. That'll be a little bit north of where we're at. It'll be closer to Rockport is what we're hearing. But you can see how intense this is behind us right now. Imagine when the storm makes landfall 17, 18, 24 hours from now. This storm is a big one. Again, this is the first major hurricane to hit the state of Texas since 1999, the nation's first major hurricane since 2005. But for the Corpus Christi area, the last time they faced something that was classified as a major hurricane, Hurricane Celia in 1970. Live in North Padre Island this morning, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News. Chris, Lisa. Well, guys, this storm just upgraded to a Category 3 a short while ago. You can see the winds really starting to pick up here in the Corpus Christi area. And if you can't see it right now, take a look at a prime piece of evidence. That power pole looks like it's gonna snap any minute now as power is starting to go out to thousands of people in the Coastal Bend area. One area that's affected is at the intersection of Everhart and Curtis Clark on the northwest corner of the intersection. You see the Middle East Market in Delhi. That building and the ones behind it, according to the AEP website, are without power at this time. 6,500 people, more than 6,500 people in the Coastal Bend area currently without power. What we have been hearing from our KIII experts is that when the power went out, it would be out for 3 to 7 days possibly. And that number of people who are without power could grow. Areas closest to the water might be the first ones to lose power. We're seeing outages all around the Corpus Christi Bay, following that horseshoe shape around the bay as Hurricane Harvey continues to push its way inland. Again, you can see one power pole ready to snap and take the wires down with it. 150 people at this intersection almost are without power at this time as the rain, the winds, and the storm continues to get stronger here in Corpus Christi. We're at the intersection of Everhart and Curtis Clark. Kurtis Quillin, 3 News. Guys.
Continuing our coverage of Hurricane Harvey, our team in Corpus Christi says the storm could make landfall in the next few hours.
Channel 6 News reporter Kurtis Quillin is live there with the very latest in Corpus. Kurtis.
Well, Doug, Leslie, honestly, we probably could have told you when this storm got upgraded because it increased in intensity incredibly quickly. Right now, the rain is so intense and the wind is so strong. It feels like I'm being pelted in the face by BBs. There's debris flying about here in Corpus Christi, including what I'm standing on from a nearby Home Depot store. As we walk down this part right outside of our hotel on the main highway coming through Corpus, you can see many are bowing in the wind because this storm is so strong. Recently named a Category 4 and landfall still not for a couple of hours. We will bring you all the information on Harvey as we've got it on the air and online. Now, live inside the storm, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News. Doug, Leslie.
All right, Kurtis, stay safe.
We're continuing to make our way across the North Beach area of Corpus Christi after Harvey is continuing to push inward towards San Antonio. One of the things we have found is power is out in most of the North Beach area. Here on this road, nearest the beach on the way to Surfside Park, we discovered this power pole cleanly snapped by Harvey's winds, blocking off the road. But unfortunately, that's not the only thing blocking this road. As you can see here, it's It's flooding over. The water as deep as 18 inches. And it comes all the way up to the top of my rain boot at times. It is blocking off this road. Definitely not ideal conditions for anybody to be out in this weather. In North Beach, Kurtis Quillin, 3 News. We are on FM 3512. You see how strong these winds still are. And if that's not evident, check out where we've got what can only be described as some major flooding in what appears to be a field between Corpus Christi and Port Aransas. We were trying to get over to Aransas Pass. The main road is blocked off by power lines down on the road. Nobody's really moving anywhere there. We've tried 2 different backways now, and we haven't been able to get there. They've both been flooded over. The rains from Harvey have been so much, too much for the saturated grounds to handle, and we're starting to see some of the effects and some of the flash flooding as Hurricane Harvey is still present, very much present here in the coastal bend area. This is just another sign. At last check, so many people without power, according to AEP. And as you can see, it's just very dangerous everywhere you go in the coastal bend right now. Damage in Aransas Pass not limited to commercial structures, residential. There's a church here on the north side of town that if you look at it, there's a lot of brick missing. The winds from Harvey blew that brick into a giant pile at the bottom of the building. But back here on this side of the street at Aransas Pass High School, the damage is quite visible. The rains from Hurricane Harvey have left what looks to be a lake in the front of Aransas Pass High School. Winds have blown the sign and air units on the top of the building over. And if you look over here to my left, your right, that is the scoreboard, crumpled up like a sheet of notebook paper, laying in the front of the school. But if you look in front of the school, there's not a gym and there's not a football stadium on this side of the campus. So that's a long way that Harvey carried that scoreboard face. And it takes a lot of wind from Hurricane Harvey to knock this power pole to the point where if it falls, it will block off access to this road. It is leaning over the westbound lane of this road. Now, there's another one right down the street that snapped like a twig into a parking lot, and that's just another reason that this is a town that has no electricity right now. Here in Aransas Pass, no electricity, no water service, no internet, no phones, no landlines, no cell service. It's definitely, Harvey has definitely left its mark on Aransas Pass, but it could have been worse. That's something that the police chief told us, is they were able to get through a Category 4 hurricane with no fatalities and no injuries. In Aransas Pass, Kurtis Quillin, 3 News. Before Harvey made landfall Friday night, this building I'm standing in Aransas Pass was a Sonic drive-thru. Now, it's a heap of metal, of which the destruction is not only contained to this property, but extends into the field next door, with signs and metal going as far back as more than 100 yards to the back of the property line on the lot next to it. That just shows how strong the winds Harvey brought with him to the coastal bend were. And the flooding around the city is another key that shows just how much rain he brought. So many intersections completely underwater here in Aransas Pass, including the entire parking lot to Aransas Pass High School. The lucky part for Aransas Pass, no deaths and no injuries. That's according to Police Chief Eric Blanchard, who tells us that it's a big win, especially as close to the eye of the storm was, saying, quote, "It could have been much worse." In Aransas Pass, Kurtis Quillin, 3 News.
A little further up the coast, the people in Aransas Pass are experiencing extreme flooding and heavy damage after the storm made landfall in the area around 10 p.m. last night. That's where we find Channel 6 News reporter Kurtis Quillin, who is on the ground in Aransas Pass, continuing our team coverage tonight from the Texas coast. Kurtis, looks like that area was hit pretty hard.
A Category 4 at landfall, Hurricane Harvey leaving its mark on the Texas Gulf Coast. No internet, no phones, no electricity, and no water for now in Aransas Pass, except for the water which floods intersections like this one at Houston and Harrison in the central part of the city. This isn't the only intersection rather, where this is happening. Another intersection down the street on Wheeler on the west side of town. It looks exactly like this one. Cars trying to get through it, water up to the middle of their driver door. But if you ask the police chief here, the flooding isn't that big of a concern. His bigger concern is something he's relieved about right now.
We saw the downed utility poles and some of the flooding, minor flooding, which we're kind of used to some of the flooding that we've seen, and some structural damage to businesses and stuff around town. I'm happy that so far we haven't found anybody seriously injured or killed.
No fatalities, no serious injuries. That is a huge win for cities like Aransas Pass. For that to be the case, when you consider how close to Rockport we are and how close to the eye of Harvey we sit right now. Tracking Harvey from Aransas Pass, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News.
Not far from where Harvey made landfall in Rockport is the town of Aransas Pass. As our own Kurtis Quillin shows us, in a 10-mile stretch, it can go from bad to devastating while still leaving everyone in the dark.
But I will tell you, it was definitely a rough night.
As Hurricane Harvey slammed the Texas Gulf Coast, it left many in worry. A Category 4 upon landfall near Rockport, Harvey proved fatal. Just up the road in Aransas Pass, the impact was brutal as well. But Police Chief Eric Blanchard recognizes it could have been much worse.
So far, we've been quite lucky, I think, with what we found as far as health and safety of our residents and people that did happen to stick around.
No deaths and no injuries reported in Aransas Pass, but the storm left its mark around the city. Trees uprooted, roads underwater, telephone poles snapped like twigs, and it's left Aransas Pass with no electricity, no water, no phone service, and no internet. And Saturday, as people finally were able to see what destruction they were facing, emotions ran high.
It's just not comforting seeing, the people that are going to be suffering.
Buildings left in ruin like this unfortunately line the Texas Gulf Coast as Harvey has made his way towards San Antonio, leaving the owners to pick up the pieces. And while the city police chief says there are no confirmed deaths and no confirmed serious injuries, which is a big win for the city, for some, they're still looking for answers, not from the city of Aransas Pass, but from loved ones.
Hopefully she's safe, but I haven't heard from her since 7 o'clock last night, so I drove back from San Antonio at midnight.
KIII lives in Corpus Christi and evacuated to San Antonio. His anxiety is one shared by many Texans who live near the coast, whether it's a loved one, pet, or their home, especially when KIII saw the flooding left in Harvey's wake.
It is nerve-wracking, especially to be so close and seeing this. Hopefully I can get around.
And as thousands of Texans are left to pick up the pieces, Blanchard says it might be best to wait.
You're probably better off not coming back to town right now.
They're hoping to get services up and running as soon as possible. In Aransas Pass, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News.
First Texan thing that as soon as the hurricane's over, we all rush to Whataburger. It's really convenient.
Just days ago, this Whataburger at South Padre Island Drive and Weber Road in Corpus Christi was closed, as were just about all stores and restaurants in the area as Hurricane Harvey barreled toward the Texas coast. Sunday, they announced this location would be the first restaurant in the iconic chain which started in Corpus to reopen after Harvey. It didn't take long for lines to form as people waited as long as 2 hours.
We left Rockport 2 days ago, and we actually found a motel, but living out of the ice chest.
For some, it was a chance to get their hands on a hot meal.
I'm ordering number one, the full meal.
Especially for those who remain without power.
We live right down the street, and my folks are over in Portland with no power, and water just got back turned on, so I figured I'd stop and get something warm to eat for them.
Because for the people of the coastal bend, it's a step forward in coming out of a time of devastation.
I think this is just a start. We should start rolling off of this.
You have the order for Will?
Yeah. Kurtis Quillin, 3 News.
Cities across the Texas coastline hit hard when Harvey swept through Friday are now starting to clean up.
One of those cities is Corpus Christi. Our own Kurtis Quillin has been on the ground there covering this storm since before it made landfall. He joins us now live. Kurtis, how's the cleanup effort going?
Well, guys, one thing to note is the local energy distributor down here, AEP, says almost 173,000 people in the coastal bend remain without power tonight. But here in Corpus Christi, the electricity is starting to come back up, including at this gas station, where anybody driving by on the access road can see what Harvey left behind in his wake as he went. But this morning, late last night, this gas station I'm standing at right now reopened, giving people access to resources they needed. Gas for chainsaws, generators, cars, access to food and clean water, because until just an hour and a half ago, the city of Corpus Christi was under a boil water notice, to the point nobody was even able to sell ice. And the reopening of gas stations like this and restaurants across the city is something that two gentlemen we spoke with earlier today are very appreciative of.
We've been out of power for about 3 days now. Gas station, this is actually the first time putting gas in about 3 days. So now it's time to help others clean up and be prepared, for the next time.
Now we are bracing for a little bit more rain down here in the coastal bend, but like we said, that boil water notice is now lifted, so people without power, can now start going to get ice and keep things cool. And with restaurants starting to reopen around the city, they have access to warm meals and not just preserved foods like beef jerky and peanut butter and jelly like we've been eating the last few days. Recovering from Harvey live in Corpus Christi, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News.
All right, Curtis, thanks so much.
And before Harvey brought catastrophic floods into Houston, it made landfall outside Corpus Christi as a Category 4 hurricane.
The city of Corpus Christi was just 40 miles from the eye of the storm, but is now able to move forward. Our own Kurtis Quillin explains tonight from Corpus Christi.
We left Rockport 2 days ago, and we actually found a motel, but living out of the ice chest, basically. So.
Across the coastal bend of Texas, recovery is underway after Hurricane Harvey left severe damage and flooding. Much of the area nearest landfall remains without electricity or phone service, but in Corpus Christi, recovery has begun. While crews are working to fully restore power, the most simple of resources returning is making a difference.
We've been out of power for about 3 days now. Gas station, this is actually the first time putting gas in about 3 days. So.
The return of gas stations gives people access to gas, clean water, and food.
Putting the food in the in the hood of the car to warm up some raviolis in a can, to warm them up.
And it's happening in more ways than one. Restaurants in the Corpus Christi area starting to reopen for residents. On Sunday, the first Whataburger reopened, and when that happened, it was a very popular choice. The line going a quarter mile to a half mile back.
We were actually just saying as a first texting thing that as soon as the hurricane's over, we all rushed to Whataburger. It's really convenient. I think most people were out of power, eating canned foods and everything.
Some waited in line for 2 hours to get a warm meal, be it for them or someone still in the dark.
We live right down the street, and my folks are over in Portland with no power, and water just got back turned on, so I figured I'd stop and get something warm to eat for them.
That's as more and more restaurants are opening their doors for the first time after Harvey, a symbol of an area moving forward from hard times.
I think this is just a start. We should start rolling off of this.
In true Texas fashion. In Corpus Christi, Kurtis Quillin, Channel 6 News.
We know something new every single time.
Carlos Lazo is a patrol officer with the Corpus Christi ISD Police Department. Since Hurricane Harvey hit the coastal bend, he's been one of several police officers in the district monitoring the campuses in 12-hour shifts.
We're trying to make sure, assess the damage from the hurricanes because we want to, have everything safe and secure and as best as possible for the kids when they come back to school.
Originally scheduled to begin class Monday, the district is taking the week after Harvey to inspect buildings and remove anything which could be dangerous for kids.
Principals would have an opportunity to come and assess their campuses, develop a plan to ensure that everything was repairable and the campuses were safe.
Several campuses remain without power, but luckily no damage to buildings.
A lot of the schools, they have newly planted trees. They've kind of fell over and they're in the way.
Some of the parents had already texted me some pictures of what was going on with the pavilion.
Some of the most serious damage includes this pavilion covering a basketball court at Berlanga Elementary School. Monday morning, crews began removing the cover to make it safe for students once again. Other than that, it was mostly down lines and uprooted trees, which the district is working to get removed or repaired. With security systems and fire alarms fully functional, all the district hopes is missing come September 5th is students.
We got to make sure everything's good to go for them because we want it perfect for them when they come back.
And we'll be welcoming them with a smile and open arms.
In Corpus Christi, Kurtis Quillin, 3 News.
A Central Texas man says he's inspired after 2 trips to Southeast Texas. He says it's after what he saw, not the damage, but people helping people. Kurtis Quillin joins us now with more. Hey, Kurtis.
Hey, Chris. James Everard says he saw firsthand countless Texans putting aside differences to help one another. In a time of such political division, he says it proves this is a country which has always been great.
I want to congratulate the governor. I want to congratulate everybody that's worked so hard. It's been an incredible 5 days, 6 days.
It's been a whirlwind in the Lone Star State since Hurricane Harvey struck the Texas Gulf Coast. James Everard, who lives in KIII, has gone down to help those affected.
When I joined the military and I raised my right hand, I swore to defend the nation and to help Americans, and that's something that never ends. That's something that doesn't have an expiration date. So when I see people that needed help, well, that's what I did.
Twice. He also helped after Hurricane Katrina.
In Katrina, with 1st Cav Division, I knew what I was doing. I had the training, so I figured if I have the training, I have the time, might as well go ahead and use it.
But he doesn't want his work to be the story because he says he's seen so many people helping. At one point, Everard was on a truck helping Texans get things they needed in the Southeast Texas floods. The people he was working with came from all types of backgrounds and were all kinds of races from both ends of the political spectrum. But it didn't matter. They were doing something Everard hadn't seen before.
People rolled in before the government could even get there.
And for the veteran, it was a sign of hope. In a time of division, in a time of tension, there was unity.
Every American, no matter who you were or where you came from, we came together as Americans.
Proof that in a time of need, people can answer the call to help. It was a message Everard witnessed, and now he wants to share it.
As long as we're Americans, we can work together, we can be strong, and we can be part of the greatest nation in the world.
With the hope, people will unite, even when the chaos is over. Now, Everard tells me he's working on a plan to go back down to Beaumont soon and continue helping. Chris.
Wow. All right, Curtis, thanks so much.
Harvey flooded Southeast Texas, breaking all kinds of records. Countless people rushed in to help, including a group of business owners from the Temple and Belton areas.
6 friends from Bell County took their boats to Houston to help. Channel 6 News reporter Kurtis Quillin joins us now with more on how their heroic efforts almost cost 2 of them their lives.
Well, Doug, Leslie, Chris Butler and his cousin were 2 of the 6 men who traveled to Houston after Hurricane Harvey hit. But after getting in the water, Chris almost became a victim himself.
Search and rescue!
When Hurricane Harvey slammed the Texas coast, thousands of Texans jumped at the chance to help, including Chris Butler.
I went down to Houston Monday morning. I left at about 10 a.m.
Chris lives right outside Temple, and when his friends told him they were headed south, he grabbed his boat and joined. But when he got his boat in the floodwaters near Cypress, things went awry.
That's when I turned around, is when the risk of me being needed to rescue versus rescuing people, where I decided that I couldn't do any good.
Chris wound up in a whirlpool where 2 bodies of water met. Then his boat took on 6 inches of water from all the rain. When he hit a current, he almost capsized, all before his motor almost quit.
It was like the motor didn't do anything, and I barely got out of that whirlpool. And so I didn't know if I was going to make it back or not, but I was telling my cousin we were.
While Chris spent hours getting back to a safer place, his friend Blake Van Dusen was near Buffalo Bayou, rescuing stranded residents, not knowing his friend was almost a victim too.
It's unfortunate that it happens to somebody you know and somebody trying to help, especially when their heart was in the right place.
When Chris finally returned home, the reality of his situation sank in.
Felt like a dream. Looking back at it, it was so surreal.
But he says his trip was a real wake-up call to just how dangerous things in South Texas have become because of Hurricane Harvey. And he says he still plans to help as much as he can. Both Butler and Van Dusen ask people learn from the disaster, whether that's evacuating or improving survival skills to reduce rescues and fatalities in the future. Doug, Leslie.
All right, thanks, Curtis.